The city of Oakhaven, nestled in a verdant valley, was once a bastion of peace. For generations, its people had lived by the seasons, their lives a comforting rhythm of honest work and communal feasts. The only shadow on their world was the ancient, unsettling forest that hugged the valley's edge. A place they called the Whispering Woods, for the low, constant hum that seemed to emanate from its depths. It was a sound like countless voices muttering just beyond the edge of hearing, and it was the first sign of the coming darkness. The change was insidious, a slow, creeping rot. It began with the little things. The fresh-baked bread would turn to tasteless ash in the oven. The milk, which had always been so sweet and creamy, would curdle into a sour, black sludge overnight. At first, the townsfolk, ever practical, blamed the weather or a blighted crop. But soon the malady spread to the people themselves. A strange, listless sickness settled upon the children. They would stare into the middle distance, their eyes vacant as they spoke in the low, muttering tones of countless unseen voices, their words promising things no one should ever want. Ilara, a young woman with a deep knowledge of herbs and a quiet respect for the woods, was one of the first to truly understand. The herbs she harvested for her tonics now withered in her basket. She saw strange, twisting sigils on the trees at the forest's edge, not hearts or initials, but glyphs that seemed to writhe in the corner of her eye, warnings she could not read. Her heart seized with a cold certainty. This was not a blight of the land, but a corruption born of a single, malevolent will. The source, she knew, was the Witch of the Woods. Her name was Morwen, and her cottage wasn't a home but a malignant heart, a twisted knot of wood and stone that seemed to have grown from the corrupted earth itself. The air around it was a thick, suffocating blanket of damp earth, rotted leaves, and a sickly sweet perfume that made the head swim. Ilara, in her desperation, went to Mayor Alistair, a man of logic and reason who scoffed at her tales of a witch. "It's mass hysteria, Ilara," he insisted, his voice gruff. "The mind plays tricks in times of hardship." But the hardship grew into a plague of nightmares. People woke screaming, their beds filled with slithering things, their dreams haunted by the sight of the witch's empty, staring windows. The city's bravest men, a company of 25 led by the mayor's own son, Marcus, were chosen to march into the woods and burn the cottage to the ground. Ilara begged them not to go, but they were men of pride, their armor glinting in the sickly, bruised light of the woods. The path they followed seemed to vanish behind them, each tree looking identical to the last. The suffocating silence broke in unnatural ways, a snapping twig that was not theirs, the distant mournful cry of a creature that had no name. They found the cottage, a tumor of graying wood and blackened stone with a roof of stitched hides, and they tried to set it ablaze, but the wood refused to catch, and a profound disorientation settled over them, a feeling that the passage of time was a delusion. When they finally tried to retreat, the forest closed in. The slick roots felt like clutching fingers, and the trees themselves seemed to shift, blocking their way. Only 3 men returned. They were found at the forest's edge, their armor dented, their swords broken, their eyes hollow with a terror no words could describe. They did not speak of what they saw, but they no longer slept. The whispers that had once been distant were now a constant, maddening presence in their minds, promising things they did not want, showing them glimpses of utter blackness. Ilara, heartbroken and terrified, knew she had to act. She gathered her herbs, her mind a storm of fear and resolve, and went into the woods alone, following a path only she, with her deep connection to the land, could perceive. She came to a clearing where the trees formed a circle, and in the center stood not a cottage, but an ancient, gnarled oak, its bark covered in the writhing runes. As she watched, a single, crooked plume of thick, oily smoke rose from within the tree, and she realized the horrifying truth. Morwen was not a person in a house. She was the consciousness of the corrupted forest, and her power was a tendril of dark fog that was now spreading over the city. Ilara ran back to Oakhaven, but it was already too late. The air was a heavy, suffocating blanket, and the whispers were in every home, in every ear. People stood in the streets, staring blankly at the sky, their minds consumed by the same nightmares. The wind no longer rustled the leaves, it carried a chill that seeped into bones and froze the blood in veins. The town had become a living monument to fear, and Morwen's curse was not just a threat from the woods. It was a darkness that had been born, nourished by the forest's ancient evil, and had finally found its way home to hunt the very souls of the people it tormented. In the city's great archives, a reclusive scholar named Silas, who had long dismissed the folk tales, became obsessed with a scroll found in a long-forgotten crypt. The document spoke of an elder evil that had slept beneath the valley since before man walked the earth. It described a heart of bark and stone and a soul of spoken lies that would one day awaken. Silas realized with a sickening dread that the Whispering Woods was not merely a forest, it was the physical form of this ancient evil, and Morwen was its voice, its conscious will. The whispers were not just maddening sounds, they were the fragments of ancient memories and curses woven into the fabric of the trees themselves. Ilara, desperate to find an answer, found Silas in the archives, his face illuminated by a single candle surrounded by crumbling scrolls. He showed her a final cryptic passage. To silence the voice, the listener must become the speaker, and the earth must hear the truth of its own corruption. Silas believed this meant they had to enter the heart of the woods, not to fight, but to perform a counter-ritual, a final act of defiance. The plan was perilous. Ilara, with her connection to the land, would serve as the speaker, and Silas would use his arcane knowledge to amplify her voice. They entered the woods at night, guided by the malevolent glow of Morwen's cottage. The whispers were no longer just a hum, they were distinct words, twisting promises and mocking laughter that tried to break their minds. The trees shifted, their roots rising like a net of clutching fingers, but Ilara pressed on, her resolve hardening. They reached the clearing with the ancient oak. The oily smoke no longer rose from within the tree, it writhed around it, a living, coiling thing. Silas, trembling, began to chant from the ancient scroll, his voice a frail counterpoint to the deafening whispers. Ilara, standing before the tree, closed her eyes and began to sing, her voice a pure, desperate melody. She sang of the city's past, of the joy and peace that had once flourished there. She sang of the love that bound the people together, of the sun on the fields and the stars in the sky. She was not speaking against the evil, she was speaking the truth of what it had corrupted, making the earth itself hear. For a moment the whispers faltered, the oily smoke wavered, the tree groaned, its bark cracking, and a sound like 1,000 voices screaming in agony tore through the woods. It seemed they were winning, but then, the tree split open, and from its depths, something crawled out. It was not a woman. It was a creature of twisted wood and blackened stone, its body a mass of writhing roots, its face a gnarled mess with 2 gaping empty holes for eyes. It was Morwen's true form, and she was the woods. Morwen raised a root-like arm, and a wave of pure psychic torment hit them. Silas's mind shattered, and he fell to the ground, blood running from his ears. Ilara's voice caught in her throat, her song of hope extinguished. The evil was too old, too vast. Morwen did not need to touch them, she simply reached into their minds and crushed the truth they had tried to speak. The final act of the curse was not a physical assault. It was a mental one. The oily fog that had spread from the woods seeped into every home, every building, and every mind. The people of Oakhaven no longer had nightmares, they lived them. The whispers became the only language they knew. The promises of the curse the only thoughts they had. They did not die. They simply became living husks, their eyes hollow, their minds consumed. The city of Oakhaven stands to this day, a silent, haunted monument. Its buildings are intact, its streets empty save for the motionless figures who stare blankly at the bruised twilight sky. The whispering can be heard for miles, a low, constant hum that warns any traveler to turn back. The curse of Morwen was not a fleeting terror, but a permanent state. The forest had claimed its heart, and the city, in its final, silent surrender, became a part of the Whispering Woods.